This pain wasn't random. It was recognition. What broke you open was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to reveal who you were all along. You were overlooked, not because you were weak, but because heaven was hiding you. You were different, not because you were flawed, but because you were marked. Isolated in rooms full of people, speaking a language no one understood. Was it rejection, or was it redirection? Was your silence a wound, or a weapon being formed? Stay with me, because by the end of this message, the mystery that has followed you since childhood may finally make sense. The invisible pull, the dreams you couldn't explain, the ache of not belonging. What if it wasn't a curse? What if it was the evidence that you were chosen? Welcome to Chosen One's Prophecy, where the hidden are revealed and the marked are remembered, where the ones who've walked alone discover they were never forgotten. The word says in Jeremiah 1:5, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations." This wasn't just for Jeremiah, it's for every soul that's carried a divine calling they couldn't name. Until now. So, stay, because the signs that are about to unfold may explain your entire life. The silent marking. Before anyone could define you, heaven had already sealed you. You bore a mark that didn't show on skin, but in soul. The kind that made you quiet in crowded places, watchful, sensitive, set apart. Even before you understood the language of God, your life was already speaking to Him. Some children chase attention, but you chased meaning. You saw through masks. You listened when others laughed. It wasn't that you didn't fit in. It was that your spirit already recognized what didn't align. You weren't cold. You were cloaked, like Samuel sleeping near the ark, not yet knowing that the voice calling in the night was divine. Your dreams weren't random. Your instincts weren't childish. They were whispers from the God who chose you before you had a name. You weren't rejected. You were reserved. And if you trace your earliest memories, can you see the first time heaven tried to speak? The gift of not belonging obscurity is not absence. It's strategy. God hides what He treasures. When the crowd moved left, something in you pulled right. When others chased applause, your soul longed for something real. This dissonance wasn't dysfunction. It was divine filtration. Like Moses growing up in a palace that could never feel like home, you were raised in an environment that could not contain who you were becoming. You didn't belong because you were never meant to blend in. You asked, "Why don't they see me?" God whispered, "Because they're not supposed to shape you. I am." The silence wasn't punishment. It was divine surveillance. Let that echo in your memory. Every room you were left out of was a room that couldn't carry your scroll. The fire in the furnace pain has always spoken to you in a language others ran from, because deep down you knew suffering wasn't the end. It was the entrance. You were betrayed by those you trusted, left behind, lied to, mocked for your light. But like Joseph in the pit, your rejection was the staircase to the throne. Every heartbreak, every silent scream into the pillow, every moment you thought, "This is too much." God was not absent. He was hammering purpose into your bones. Your tears were not wasted. They were oil, preparing your heart to carry glory without pride. You weren't broken. You were being built. So ask yourself, what if the pain was permission? Darkness knows your name. Why do you think hell came for you so young? Why were the attacks so strategic, so relentless? Because darkness saw your light before you did. Because demons monitor scrolls before they manifest in the natural. You didn't battle random anxiety. You were assaulted because of alignment. The enemy doesn't waste energy on the unassigned. Like Jesus in the wilderness, like Job in the storm, you were tried not because you were weak, but because your existence threatened systems of control. Those nightmares weren't just psychological, they were attempts to shut your mouth before your mantle matured. You weren't under attack. You were under confirmation. And if this resonates, comment 40 or 4 now. Let the enemy see that you're still standing and still receiving. The hidden senses. They called you too sensitive, but God calls it discernment. You felt atmospheres shift before words were spoken. You sensed danger before it arrived. You cried over things you couldn't explain. This wasn't fragility. This was prophetic wiring. Heaven tuned your frequency early, so you would recognize truth in a world filled with noise. Elijah heard God not in the wind, the fire, or the quake, but in the whisper. You weren't overreacting. You were overhearing. And now that you know, will you still silence what heaven designed to guide you? Conversations with the invisible. There were moments in your childhood when you spoke to someone you couldn't see, when you sat in silence and somehow felt held. That wasn't fantasy, that was formation. Like David singing alone to sheep while angels listened, you were learning the cadence of communion. You knew how to speak before you knew what to say, because God was walking beside you, training you for the days when His voice would be the only map. You weren't alone. You were instructed, and the same presence you felt back then is still here now. The Guardianship Mystery. You should have been destroyed, but you weren't. You walked away from accidents. You escaped toxic relationships. You survived moments that should have broken you in half, not because you were lucky, but because angels stood between you and death. God stationed protection around your life because what you carry must be born. Like baby Moses floating in a basket, your destiny was defended, even when you didn't know it had begun. You weren't spared by chance. You were shielded by assignment. So the question is, what were you saved for? Fascination with the sacred. You weren't drawn to noise. You were drawn to meaning, to stories of martyrs, prophets, warriors, scripture, fire. While others clung to fiction, you chased the eternal. You studied David's courage, Esther's obedience, Joseph's endurance, Gideon's insecurity, not just to learn, but because something in you remembered. Their stories weren't just examples, they were mirrors. You weren't just inspired, you were being ignited, because what you saw in them was already living in you. The search for what cannot be named. You asked questions that made adults nervous. What is my purpose? Why am I here? Where was God when it hurt? You didn't settle for surface answers, because your soul wasn't made for shallow things. Like young Jesus in the temple, you didn't come to be entertained. You came to understand, and that hunger was holy, a sign that you were born to carry answers, not just consume them. Your questions weren't rebellion. They were revelation trying to rise, which means your curiosity was proof of your calling, the power to endure. You were forged, not pampered. You were trained in chaos, raised in silence, shaped by losses no child should carry. But here you are, still breathing, still reaching, still open to the voice of God. That's not weakness, that's witness. Job lost everything. And still, he didn't curse God, because somewhere deep, the chosen know. Suffering isn't the end, it's the altar. Prophetic declaration. You weren't just surviving, you were being strengthened. And now, heaven is ready to use what hell couldn't steal. You weren't forgotten, you were preserved, guarded like a flame in a world soaked with rain. Hidden, not because you were unworthy, but because the time had not yet come. Now it has. Every question, every ache, every unexplained longing, they were all part of the same whisper. You are not ordinary. You are ordained. You walked through silence so you could carry a sound. You endured the fire so you could become the flame. Heaven did not overlook you. Heaven assigned you. You are not who the world said you were. You are who God knew you were before the world began. You have been tested. You have been refined. And now, you are being revealed. This is your prophetic seal. You were marked. You were forged. And now, you are being sent. If this word stirred something ancient in your spirit, comment 777 below. As a prophetic act that you remember who you are, share the moment that struck you deepest, the one that felt like it was written from your own story, because you're not the only one, and someone else needs your voice to find theirs. Subscribe and stay connected to Chosen One's prophecy. This isn't just a channel. It's a gathering place for the remnant rising. You are not alone. You are the next echo.